On this edition of SciTech Now, microbrews are a big hit in New York, but one of the main ingredients, hops, still comes to us from the West Coast. Find out how scientists at Cornell are trying to make sure the beer is from here.
One of the purposes of the lab is to connect with the growers. And so, because of this being a university, we can always venture out into analytical areas that the commercial analytical operations don't offer yet.
Then, battling the human bulge with the help of grizzly bears.
What we see in bears looks very similar to what happens in diabetic humans.
A revolution in weather forecasting is on the radar.
Our satellites, because they're small and light, they burn up very cleanly in just a few years in the atmosphere, and we replace them with better technology so that we always have the best information.
And how much of what you see at the movies about dinosaurs is true?
Dinosaurs were the first group of animals that completely abandoned life in the seas. They were the first animals to be like, you know what, peace out ocean, I'm gonna live exclusively on land.
We'll set the prehistoric record straight. Coming up next on SciTech Now.
SciTech Now is made possible through the support of our members.
Mohawk Valley Community College. Your future starts here, offering education and workforce development ranging from hands-on to high-tech, including nano, manufacturing, electrical engineering, and more. More information at mvcc.edu.
And by Giotto Enterprises, whose companies include Fiber Instrument Sales, The Light Connection, Molding Solutions, and Firmer Precision, providing solutions for fiber optic, telecom, molding, and CNC machining industries. More information at giottoenterprises.com.
Hello, I'm Simon Perez, and welcome to SciTech Now, our weekly program bringing you the latest breakthroughs in science, technology, and innovation. Don't worry, be hoppy. It's a phrase that could describe Central New York's recent microbrewery boom. But it's not entirely true. Decades ago, Central New York was the hops capital of the country, but Prohibition and a killer fungus pretty much ruined it. So, most of the hops local brewers use today come from out of state. Scientists at Cornell University are looking to change that.
10 years ago, my wife and we bought a farm. And trying to run a 102-acre farm, we learned that there's new analytical methods that would be useful to help growers and other farmers. So having this experience, I've decided to start to implement some of these ideas. And one of these ideas was the use to take the extracts out of leaves and analyze them and help growers make fertilizer recommendations based on this extraction. And the traditional method, they used a wet ashing method or a dry ashing where they actually burned the sample away and then analyzed the ash. But now with the equipment is now 10 times more sensitive, we can use new analytical methods now to get at this information that will be useful for growers.
I've always loved beer. And that was pretty much like the beginning of it, was how beer was made, what it was made of. And I've always had, I've been gardening and farming and doing that my entire life, so I figured I'd give it a try. They're currently growing 7 different varieties, but these are the aromas. The Cascades and the alpha aromas are the ones. The information that Cornell provides and can provide is extremely important. I mean, it's part of growing. The grape farmers that are around here do petiole and leaf analysis and soil samples, so the hop growers are going to need to do that too. If you want top production, you need to know your nutrients. Keep your 3 alive. They'll get all the energy, they'll produce all the hops.
The first step in the process is we take the sample and we freeze it. And we just put it in a bag. We don't need a lot of sample, but we need about a handful of leaves. Leaf tissue, we'll shred it up. Then we'll place it into a garlic press. Once we take the leaf extract and dilute it with water, we then put it into what's called a plasma emission spectrometer. And this machine has a flame that's as hot as the surface of the sun. And when the sample goes through it, it gives off light. and we can measure most of the elements listed in the periodic table. So we can also not only measure the elements that are of interest to the plant, but we can also measure the elements that are toxic to the plant or toxic to humans if they consume the plants. So we look at lead, cadmium, arsenic, and several other heavy metals that would be helpful.
So having Cornell being so close, having them be able to now give us the sap test or do the sap test, which has such a broad range of nutrient analysis and just everything that you can think of, it helps you make sure you're on the right track.
One of the purposes of the lab is to connect with the growers. And so because of this being a university, we can always venture out into analytical areas that the commercial analytical operations don't offer yet. So in the past, these samples, they were just analyzing them at commercial labs using the traditional analysis, and it wasn't giving them the information that they needed.
We started this about 5 years ago, following our dream to produce a locally made product with local ingredients and share it with our local environment.
John Rogers down at Two Goats, he opened the brewery a couple years ago. I started going there, you know, we've known each other for a long time. I started going there well before I started growing hops. And then I mentioned to him that I was growing hops and he got really excited.
Absolutely. He approached us about 3 years ago now and told us that he was going to grow some hops and if we were interested in them. And last year was the first year he brought us some hops and they turned out very well. It was a good add to our beer. He gave us 2 varieties, Cascades, which is a very common variety for pale ales, and Alpha Aroma, which I haven't used before. But as the name says, it was a very aromatic hop, which lended to the IPA. So both of them went very well into the beer.
I mean, a big area of interest is microbreweries, and transportation of raw material is very expensive. And so if we can grow them locally, it's better for the microbreweries.
So everything's looking pretty good.
Since they're on board, I think that resource alone has helped jumpstart the local hop farmer to overcome a lot of the obstacles with, you know, just natural environmental causation. And with that, we see better hops every year. And we've been here just 5 short years, and I'd like to think in every year we've tried to better each time, even the varieties that we've been getting and the varieties of beer that we've been making. I think they're just getting better all the time, and more people are recognizing it and more businesses are starting to open as well. So I think one just has domino affected the other, and here we are in the midst of a really awesome growth spurt in an absolutely beautiful region, and we're going to take it as far as we can.
Today, about 130 acres of hops are being grown in New York State. Compare that to 2011, when there were only 15 acres. Grizzly bears pile on the fat every autumn and then hibernate through the winter. But during that time, even though they're obese, they don't appear to suffer health consequences as overweight humans do. Now, scientists in Washington State are trying to figure out why. They hope studying bears will lead to therapies for human obesity and diabetes.
Plump, pudgy, portly. Call them what you will, but for grizzlies, being fat is being happy.
They're sort of OCD eaters. They will consume so much that they're putting on nearly 10 pounds a day. If you translate that to pizzas, it's about 16 large pepperoni pizzas a day.
For humans, this kind of weight gain could cause some serious health problems, like heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. But grizzlies have trouble surviving without it.
All their focus is on is eating, which, you know, it's just born out of necessity. If they don't have enough fat, they won't survive hibernation. Brutal lesson to learn if you're a bear.
grizzly bears can easily double their body fat in the lead up to hibernation. Some of the brown behemoths here at Washington State University's Bear Center will reach more than 700 pounds. Wild bears develop the ability to hibernate as a way to survive the winter when food is scarce. The fat they store up over the summer and fall fuels them through their long slumber. And during that time, their bodies change in surprising and incredible ways.
They don't eat or drink or urinate or defecate during the hibernating season. The bear's metabolism decreases drastically. Their heart rate drops from somewhere around 60 beats per minute to 10 beats per minute.
But perhaps the most remarkable adaptation during hibernation is that the bears become diabetic, or something that looks a lot like it. Their bodies become resistant to insulin, a hormone that regulates blood sugar.
What we see in bears looks very similar to what happens in diabetic humans. The big difference, though, as far as we can tell, the bears transition into and out of that state every year. So they exhibit a reversible, if you want to call it, diabetic state, which is not something that's very easy to do for humans.
Heiko Jansen studies seasonal changes in grizzlies. With help from the biotech giant Amgen, he's trying to solve the mystery of how the bears make this switch. The answer could one day lead to a treatment for human diabetes. But to study this phenomenon, you need access to hibernating bears. And the WSU Bear Center is the only place in the world where captive grizzlies hibernate.
Oh, don't scratch up my hood of my car.
Many of these bears were nuisance animals rescued from the wild. And studying a wild 700-pound grizzly is no picnic.
The bears are not something you can mess with. Even trained bears will rear their ugly heads at times unpredictably. So we have to work with them in a protected environment and very, very carefully.
Come on, Luna.
Come on, Luna.
Come on, Luna bear.
The Bear Center has worked to train bears because if we can work with trained bears, we can avoid the need to anesthetize them to do simple procedures like blood draws. We feed the bears honey when we're doing voluntary blood draws because they like it, and it's a way to reward them for working with us, and it's also a way to keep their mouth occupied. As soon as we start feeding them honey, we can ask them to sit, and then we can ask them to lay down, and then we can ask them to stick out their foot, and they'll stick their foot out through one of the slats in the crate, and we'll be able to do a voluntary blood draw that way.
Good girl. Good girl. Good girl, Luna.
But not every bear is so accommodating. Some have to be tranquilized.
We'll load up a darting pistol with the drug that we'll use to anesthetize the animal, and then a few minutes later, the bear will basically fall asleep.
Researchers draw blood and take tissue samples.
We know so little about bear physiology that every time we generate a hypothesis, it's almost invariably rejected because we just know so little. And despite our best efforts, the questions we ask are almost always answered in a very different way than we expected.
The key to understanding how bears switch in and out of a diabetic state may lie in the bear's fat cells. Here in Jansen's lab, they're growing grizzly fat cells, hoping to get an up-close look at the mechanism that allows grizzlies to go from being diabetic to non-diabetic and back again.
Since our hypothesis is that it's occurring at the fat cell, we wanted to work with those cells directly.
There are about 1 million grizzly bear fat cells in this plate I have in front of me.
Somewhere within that cellular molecular machinery is a mechanism that can explain this switch. The hope of everyone is that we would be able to treat diabetes. We all realize that that's a very long shot, but insulin seems to do similar things in the bear that it does in people, and thereby understanding those mechanisms could help diabetics overcome their disease.
And as long as food is involved, the bears at the center are happy to help.
If successful, this research could have a major impact on healthcare in the United States, as nearly 1 of every 10 Americans has diabetes. In January, weather forecasters predicted so much heavy snowfall for New York City, one storm was called the snowpocalypse. They got it wrong, but maybe not next time. Here's how one man is using a constellation of cutting-edge satellites to revolutionize the weather prediction industry.
The inaccuracy of weather reports on record-breaking snowfalls and scorching heat has many questioning the reliability of data from outdated weather satellites. Across the globe, one man is using a constellation of cutting-edge satellites to revolutionize the weather technology industry. Peter Platzer, CEO of Spire, joins us now. So what is this new technology or this new idea? You're essentially scrunching a satellite down into the size of a wine bottle. How do you do that?
I basically do the same thing that people have done over the last 10 years with computers that used to be the size of a whole floor when I was at CERN and working there as a physicist. And now we carry it in our cell phones, in our pockets. And the same kind of like Moore's law, as people call it, that is happening on Earth, we are using in space.
The existing weather satellites that we're familiar with, I mean, they're the size of a small car, right, that's floating in the sky.
You are absolutely correct. And they are so old, they are literally blowing up.
Wow. And I would imagine that if they've been up there for a long time, my smartphone or certainly the laptop we're speaking through might be more high-tech than what's in there.
Way more high-tech. So we calculated it once that the average technology of a modern-day satellite is equivalent to a 486 PC, which you and I might remember, but hopefully most people listening and watching this will not remember even anymore.
If that kind of miniaturization can happen, I'm assuming that it is cheaper to get one of your nano satellites up than to push what weighs a small car up into space, right?
Launch cost is pretty much a direct function of weight. So the lighter you are, and our satellites are like, maybe 7 pounds or 10 pounds rather than 10,000 pounds, are significantly cheaper to bring up there.
If you can make this smaller, and if it's lighter, and if it's probably cheaper to send up in space, can you keep replacing the technology so that, say, for example, just like smartphones are getting smarter every 1.5 to 2 years, can you update the technology that's in a weather satellite because of greater processing power, better cameras?
Harry, you just hit the nail on the head. Our satellites, because they're small and light, they burn up very cleanly in just a few years in the atmosphere, and we replace them on just that 2-year life cycle that you have talked about with better technology so that we always have the best information.
What can this new breed of satellite do that our existing ones can't do as well?
They just use the strength of large numbers. That's their biggest advantage. There are certain types of measurements where it is not dependent on the size of the satellite, but simply the number of the satellites that you have that determine how much relevant data you can get. In particular, it's the temperature, the wind speed, and the rain content of the atmosphere.
Instead of having, let's say, 100 satellites that might be floating around the Earth looking at weather, let's say with your nano satellite idea, you could sprinkle 1,000 or 10,000 around our planet. What kind of information would we get, and how is that beneficial for us? How could we act on that?
The first notion that I have to separate you from is that there are 100 satellites that deliver weather data to us today. Okay. There are something like 8 that all of the world combined has. So wow. We are trying to understand something that impacts 1/3 of the global economy and 100% of the people on this planet with a handful of 486 flying in the space. One thing that has been really amazing to me is the transformation from, weather forecasters, they are always wrong, kind of like the cliche that everyone has, to a deep and sincere appreciation of how amazing those people are in their accuracy, given the limited and ridiculously small amount of data that they have available.
Best case scenario, we look up in the sky 5-10 years from now, your idea for nanosatellites is successful. What's the world outside our atmosphere look like?
10 years ago, when we needed to find our way from, I don't know, New York City to some, strange place in New Jersey, the way you found directions is you drove to a gas station, you got a paper map, you put it down on your chair next to your driver's seat, and you try to find a route, and maybe you got lost, and you ask people for directions, and that was totally normal. And everyone accepted that as an adequate level of having directions. Today, adequate level of directions is turn-by-turn navigation by a friendly voice from your iPhone or your Android phone, and we get there within 5 minutes plus or minus, knowing up-to-the-date information about traffic jams. In a decade from now, that's how accurate I want weather forecasting to be. I want you and I to have a conversation in 10 years, thinking back how antiquated weather forecasting was 10 years ago, just like navigation by a paper map is compared to the turn-by-turn direction of a Google iPhone. And the only difference, more data.
All right, Peter Platzer, CEO of Spire. Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Hi, my name is Dustin, and I love dinosaurs.
3, 2, 1.
Hi, I'm Dustin.
And I'm Zach.
And we love dinosaurs. That was pretty good. That worked out pretty well. High five.
What is a dinosaur?
It's a really good question. Zach, that is a great question. Especially for the first episode of a show that's all about dinosaurs, we should probably establish exactly what is a dinosaur. Dinosaurs were the first group of animals that completely abandoned life in the seas. They were the first animals to be like, you know what? Peace out, ocean. I'm going to live exclusively on land. The first habitually terrestrial animals on planet Earth. So, in order to determine what is a dinosaur and what isn't a dinosaur, it's kind of similar to determining what is a cat and what is not a cat. Taxonomists are scientists that classify groups of organisms based on shared characteristics. And that's kind of how we know when we see like a puma or an ocelot, even if we've never seen it before, we can pretty much figure out that's a member of the cat family.
The fur, the 4 legs, the tail, the teeth, the ears, the habitat.
So, taxonomists and paleontologists classify dinosaurs as dinosaurs based on certain shared characteristics. And there's a whole suite of these, the most important of which are probably certain positioning of holes in the skull, vertebral morphology, morphology being basically just a fancy science word for shape. Dinosaurs were the first group of animals that put their legs directly under their body. They have a ball and socket joint in their pelvis that allows their legs to come straight down under their body. If you are a crocodile or an alligator, or most reptiles, you got your arms splayed out to the side. You're kind of inefficiently locomoting with a side-to-side movement that's kind of reminiscent of when they used to live in water and they had fins that needed to be pushing water from side to side. So dinosaurs were like, peace out, I'm going on land. It's not gonna be very efficient for me to move if I have legs splayed to the side, kind of doing this weird side-to-side motion. So,
sounds exhausting.
It is, I've tried it once for an entire day. So, you put your legs directly under your body. It's much more easy, not only just to stand here, does it take a lot of energy right now?
No.
No, you just gotta balance. And then when it comes time to move, when it comes time to locomote, you can do it much more efficiently and move a lot faster. But that's not the only thing that makes a dinosaur a dinosaur. Do you wanna know what else makes a dinosaur, and you not a dinosaur?
Yes.
Of course you do, and that brings us to the thing of the week. According to our flowchart, are you a dinosaur? Step 1, are your legs directly under your body?
Yes.
Yes, legs are directly under bodies. All right, check, big check. Step 2, scales or feathers?
No.
I don't think so either. No scales, no feathers, not a dinosaur. Sorry, man.
So anything that has its legs directly underneath its body, and scales or feathers, is a dinosaur.
Everything that I have found. If you can find something that disproves this flowchart, please let me know. Can you think of an animal that just happens to have their legs directly on their body, but does have scales or feathers?
Birds.
Birds, absolutely right. But that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother episode.
We'll have more from the Dinosaur Whisperer in the coming weeks. That's it for this edition of SciTech Now. Join the conversation with your questions, comments, and thoughts on Facebook and Twitter. Next week on SciTech Now, some local entrepreneurs have a new product that takes the guesswork out of frying your favorite food.
And that's where we are bridging the gap now with Smarty Pants. You get the actual caloric intake, the actual caloric information of a recipe in real time.
Meet the man who says humans don't have much more time before they're eliminated from Earth. We'll also introduce you to a more lighthearted scientist known as the coolest dude alive. And what is it about certain cities that make them hotspots for tech startups? I'm Simon Perez. We'll see you next week on SciTech Now.
SciTech Now is made possible through the support of our members.
Mohawk Valley Community College. Your future starts here, offering education and workforce development ranging from hands-on to high-tech, including nano, manufacturing, electrical engineering, and more. More information at mvcc.edu.
And by Giotto Enterprises, whose companies include Fiber Instrument Sales, The Light Connection, Molding Solutions, and Firmer Precision, providing solutions for fiber optic, telecom, molding, and CNC machining industries. More information at giottoenterprises.com.